first meeting with the new administration. I think my first job is under Q.
It is. Thank you. So I'll really swiftly move on to the first item of the agenda, which is the appointment of chairman. To confirm the appointment of Councillor Peter Marriott as chairman of the Audit Committee for the 2019-20 council year. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you.
Okay, item 2, to confirm the appointment of Councillor Joan Davison as vice chairman of the Audit Committee for this council year. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 3, minutes of previous meeting held on the 4th of March 2019. Any errors, corrections, anything anybody wants to add to the minutes, changes? I think no. Okay, so we treat those as being accepted.
Agreed.
Apologies for absence, item 4.
Thank you, Chairman. No apologies, all members are
No,
in
thank you. Disclosure of interests. Any member with something to disclose? I can say I have maybe one I should say. I'm a trustee of 40 Degrees in Farnham, which is a Waverley owned building. So I don't think it'll have any material effect on what we discuss. Mentioned. Okay, item 5 completed. Item 6, questioned by the members of the public. Don't believe there are any.
None
That's
received,
correct.
Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Item 7, the question from members.
Also none received, Chairman.
Item 8, the external audit finance report. Laura, are you going to take us through that?
I am, yes. So I suppose I should start with a bit of context and an explanation of the change in the audit team for this year. So as you're aware, in May 19 there were elections at Waverley Council, and after those elections there was a new leader of the council appointed. The leader's son works for Grant Thornton Public Sector Audit Department based in our London office. And so it was determined that that could be perceived as a threat to the auditor's independence. And so at that point all work on the audit ceased until we fixed that issue. The solution that has been put into place is that I've taken over as manager of the external audit, and I'm based in the Birmingham office. And John Roberts, who unfortunately couldn't be here this evening, has taken over as your engagement lead, and he's based in our Bristol, Cardiff offices. So the result of that change was that the audit kicked off later than planned. So I would just like to say thank you to all of the finance staff for their efforts in getting through the work as quickly as we have, because it has been a very productive couple of weeks. So in terms of the report, on our page 3 sets out sort of the headlines for our audit findings. You'll notice throughout the report there are various references to work being in progress at the time of writing. Almost all of that work is now completed. The one outstanding area is we're still working through the final queries on valuations of the council's property. And subject to mine and John's final reviews of the file, everything else is done. And we haven't found any issues other than the one adjustment that's highlighted later in the report. Our value for money work is now also completed, and we are proposing an unqualified value for money conclusion. The report then sort of goes through in detail our findings against the significant risks that were detailed in our audit plan. We haven't had to change any of our planned work, it's all as it was back in the spring. So in terms of the adjustment to the accounts then, this is as a result of a national issue, it's not a Waverley specific issue. And basically at the 31st of March, at the end of the year, there was a lot of uncertainty around how to treat potential liabilities arising out of changes to pension arrangements going forward. And at that point in time, there was an application to appeal what is known as the McLeod judgment, which is an age discrimination claim against specifically police and fire schemes, but it has an impact on local government schemes. At the end of June, the application to appeal was rejected, and so we, at that point, decided that we considered the omission of the McLeod liabilities as an error in the financial statements. That omission on its own was not material, but when the actuary did the work to determine what the impact would be, it was also noted that there was an error in the estimate of the return on the council's pension assets. Again, that's not a Waverley specific error, that was a Surrey-wide error, and the impact of those adjustments combined is material, so we've required the council to amend the accounts, and that amendment has been made and is included in the papers. That was all I was proposing to say, unless anyone has any questions.
What's the timescale for the valuation of the property? When do you think that will be completed by?
It is hard to say. I'm hopeful that we'll be done this week, but it sort of depends on what the outcome of the queries is. So I don't want to make promises that we can't keep, but I am hopeful that end of this week will be done.
It will be what, 26, yeah. And you think that if you couldn't make the 26th following week, then you're getting close to the 31st of July deadline, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
Thanks, Chairman. So, as with last year, we're ending up pretty close to the wire with getting the final signed off report. How much time difference did having to change your team in mid-stride make? In other words, has the learning process adjusting to the new timings been catered for, and it's just that fact that you had to change the team that means we're struggling?
The fact that we had to change the team basically meant that we didn't do any audit work in June.
Right. That's pretty serious, isn't it?
So it has had quite a significant impact.
So you would comfortably be in there had it not been for that leading question. Thank you. Thanks, Chairman.
You mentioned the additional or the pension fund liability arising out of the McLeod judgment and the difference in the estimated and actual performance of the fund. I mean, it's a fair chunk of cash, but would it be correct to say in terms of the whole scheme it's sort of de minimis, or?
Yes, and we actually had quite a lot of pushback from actuaries on this because the figures are small enough that they don't consider them material, and it was quite annoying to them that we do, because it's meant that they've had to do additional work this year. But obviously our materiality is set in the context of the individual body's accounts, not the pension fund as a whole.
Thank you.
Chairman, can I just pick up on that point? So for all of the other 10 district and borough councils in Surrey, all bar one, the change necessary was material. It was just one that was just slightly less than actually the impact of this. I mean, the headlines sort of coming out at the time was about pension ruling leaves Treasury with £4 billion bill, for example. So it's pretty big news nationally. It was only sort of determined at the end of June, and so there's been a lot of activity by actuaries, by staff, by auditors, up and down the country trying to do the right thing and get the accounts presenting the accurate picture. Could I just sort of add to that, Chairman? Just to say that the for those of you who have sort of tracked through, and apologies for having to send lots of supplementary papers out as a result of this, but we had to do that so that the committee had the chance to see the impact of this feeding right the way through. And thank you to Vicky, who spent virtually a whole day locked in a room working it through to make sure that the integrity of the accounts wasn't damaged at all, because there were a lot of entries. The end result, if I could just sort of summarise, is that one side of the balance sheet's gone up by a number and the other side of the balance sheet's gone up by the same number. It doesn't actually directly impact on Waverley's finances at this point. Now, when the triennial revaluation by the actuary of the whole Surrey pension fund and the individual parts of that, Waverley being one of them, is assessed this time next year, well, then it might ripple through to the employer's rates that each employee body has to pay. But at the moment, it's a bit of a book entry, but it's a complex one, hence quite a few pages that we had to put out. But it was important you had sort of full visibility of all of the changes coming through. So when you approve the accounts, you're approving them with all of those changes, those sheets that we sent round.
Thank you. Sorry, yes, please.
Couple of points. On the follow-up on prior year recommendations, there's one about the 512k of debtors. Have you looked at whatever steps has been taken in the council in the last year to address that in terms of write-off? I mean, are you happy with the process that, if there's a write-off process, that's
So
okay?
we haven't specifically looked at that £512,000 because it sort of doesn't represent a material risk for the financial statements, but we haven't found the same level of sort of concern in this year's financial statements. So we're happy that what management have done during the year has addressed the point that we made.
Okay. There's second line point, Jim. And evaluation of property, plant and equipment, this story is in Lancashire. You say this represents a significant estimate by management. What is a significant estimate? This is on page 8, sorry.
Whereabouts am I looking?
Page 8, left-hand column, second paragraph.
It's your page 6, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Oh, yes. So the requirements of the code of practice that the accounts are prepared under are that at the balance sheet date, the figure in the balance sheet is not materially wrong. And so the approach that management take to ensuring that that is the case is their decision. It does differ at every council. There are different sort of valuation programmes in place, and they have to satisfy themselves that what they've done is sufficient to avoid material misstatement. And so that's where the judgment lies.
Okay, but the term significant estimate means what? That it's an estimate and it's significant in the sense it's big.
Yes, effectively.
Okay. Because it's an estimate, because it's not a measurement they've made.
Yeah.
It's
Any other questions?
Just one. It's probably just a process thing. It would be very useful to understand the percentage differences between years as opposed to just having the figures. I don't know if that's possible or not. The numbers actually don't mean an awful lot to me, but when I look at a percentage and see whether that's up or that's down, that actually has more meaning to me, and I can do it much faster than actually doing that myself. So if there's any chance at all, I was looking at some of the expenditure and outgoings and things like that, that would be most useful. It's the CIEX, that one in particular. If it can't be done, that's fair enough, but it's just a matter of presentation, it's quite helpful. Thank you.
Pick that up, Chairman.
Other questions? Then we are, I guess, we're looking to receive this audit report, and the recommendation would be that we vote the report as is. Would that be agreed by the committee?
Yep.
Agreed. All agreed? Thank you.
Chair, would you mind if I just thanked Lauren and her team actually, because they were parachuted in about 4 weeks ago. We never met Lauren until 4 weeks ago, and I know you worked all weekend because you were on so many others. And I think that really good work working with the team and building those sort of relationships and doing all the work in record speed. So
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Would you like to stay or are you free to go now?
I'll stay for it.
Okay, good. Next item, 9, is the annual internal audit report. I think Claire is going to take us through this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, this is the annual internal audit report, which gives an overview of the work that internal audit have completed in the last year. And again, it's a requirement that internal audit provide an opinion, which is included as part of the annual governance statement, to provide assurance on the our assurance framework that we have in place. The report itself, hopefully, gives members an overview of the role of internal audit, the approach that we apply, and on paragraph 4, that's page 5 of my report. Sorry, I'm doing it on the electronic form. And paragraph 4 provides an overview of the coverage of the areas that we covered within the council, and an analysis of the reviews that were completed as to which were had substantial, reasonable or partial or reassurance, and it gives key observations of those that provided no assurance, there were no assurance, so therefore I provided those that had partial assurance to give members an overview of where we did find areas that needed to be improved to improve our governance arrangements. Short summary of the anti-fraud and corruption work that we've completed in the year, including being part of completing the National Fraud Initiative, which most councils take part in, and also the work we've been doing regarding the Surrey County Fraud Partnership, where we've been working with 10 other boroughs and districts in the county to work together, share ideas and improve the fraud work that we're doing in that area. And there are a few performance indicators regarding our performance and also the contractor's performance. As this report is based on last year's work, which was in relation to our previous internal audit contractor that we had. So next year we will probably, and we will have, more performance indicators because our new contractor has new sets of indicators that I will then present to the committee next year. And again, at the end, you can see the actual opinions that we give regarding each clarification for each audit report.
Thank you. One or two little questions. I'm not sure which page, it's 2 page numbers of course, there's page 6 on your report, I think, where you refer to the internal audit plan.
Yes.
Is there a document reference number or something other than just the title? That's what you know about.
Well, generally the audit plan comes to the audit committee each sitting, but because the focus tonight is actually on the annual accounts and the committee approving those, the audit plan is available and it was provided to members as part of their induction, but usually at each cycle you get a progress report as to how the plan is going. So that will be coming to the next audit committee in September. I do hold a live copy of it, so if any member does wish to see that, they're more than welcome to have it.
I think it's a more general sort of question about document control. So in the long run, I'd like to see documents which have individual numbering schemes. So if we need to refer back to them, it's a specific document that we can refer back to.
Oh, right, okay.
That was basically what we had. Okay.
Right, okay. I'll take that on board.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I would certainly like to see that extended as a recommendation to all other documents produced by the officers.
Right.
So a document history reference number would be, as a cover page, would be useful. Thank you.
Thank you. On the following page, you talk about advisory reviews. What do they comprise? What are they doing?
Advisory reviews can be where there's been a new system that's been implemented and they want internal audit's opinion.
as to how to make sure the system is actually operating as the way that we want it to be operating before it goes live, or it could just have gone live, and we would then, in effect, do a walkthrough of the system, identify any areas that need to be improved before there's too much activity has actually occurred on the system.
Okay, thank you. There's one other, find it. A few minor spelling mistakes, things, or do that offline. But
sorry about that, I'll take
the
them on
one
board.
I really liked, which you can leave in as far as I, was on your page 11, the third line down. We talk about the Institute of Internal Audit.
Right, it's it.
Well spotted.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. On your item 10, internal audit performance, if you've covered this, forgive me, I might not have just understood it. And as the aspects of service element, 2018 to 19 is 92% out of potential 100%, versus 2017 to 2018, which was 100%. What was the variance of that?
The variance on that was there was 2 reviews in the 18-19 review that weren't completed and they were carried over into this year.
Okay, thank you.
Whereas the previous year there wasn't any, so therefore it was 100%.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Section 4 is just a question I hope I know the answer to, but nevertheless, if you'll bear with me. The internal audit coverage and output, there seem to be opinions expressed on the satisfactoriness of various categories of activity. It seems to be substantially satisfactory, reasonably satisfactory, partially satisfactory. You did touch on these. Presumably the areas of partial satisfactoriness, if that's what we're talking about, are the items categorised over the page.
Yes.
This is sort of syntactical rather than anything else, but improvements were, right to buy, improvements were identified relating to the review and updating of policies. Is that the need for improvements, or a sort of retrospective view that things have got better? Because, again, you know,
at the time when the review was done, there was a requirement, but since the review has been completed, those improvements have been implemented.
Oh, so the problem has been identified,
yes.
And you are reporting improvements rather than the need for improvements, yes, in those areas to bring the partial up to the higher, to the next category, or the one above, or whatever. Thank you.
On points 6, anti-fraud and corruption.
Yes.
May have asked a similar question before. Obviously, it's taken that there's been no successful fraud, but is the council sort of bombarded with attempted fraud all the time? I mean, are the people, bodies, whatever, attempting fraud against the council and systems you have in place are batting those away, or is it unusual for that, even for it to be an attempt of fraudulent?
People do attempt, but we do have good controls within our IT systems that help to prevent those getting through. But with any fraud, usually it occurs due to human error, or people not doing what they should be doing, not being maybe as vigilant as what they should be. Because again, that's where you may find even on your emails that you're getting, well we do, where it tells you that it's coming from an external source, which actually raises awareness to be aware, do you know this person and should you be opening this email? But we do have strict policies and procedures that we expect members of staff to follow. But on the other side of fraud, we do have people who make applications for our services, and in effect, some of those can be found to be fraudulent because they haven't actually provided us with a true and accurate reflection of their circumstances to enable them to provide those, to get those services, and those can slip through because we cannot check 100%. But what we do have in some of the services, like housing, we have a housing fraud officer who does in actual fact do these due diligence checks and checking the information that people provide us with, in particular things like right to buys, because there are a lot of right to buy applications we receive, but a lot of people do not always tell the truth, and it can be when they come to buy it, if we don't do those checks, they can get a property that they're not entitled to. because maybe when the first one we registered, they didn't inform us they actually already owned 2 properties, or they already had sufficient funds, and basically they shouldn't even have been on our register. So there's those kind of checks we would do, and some of those we do actually have and have taken to court to get our properties back, if they've got through the right to buy process, and it has transpired that they shouldn't have the property.
So there is an atmosphere of people trying to attempting fraud all the
Yes.
time. Yes.
But we are very diligent on that, but we can only have that diligence with the support of members of staff and the systems that we have in operation.
Yes, Richard.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll start with an apology. I should have let you have a comment on this earlier, but I left the best for last and didn't give myself enough time. Under section 7, you discuss RSM coming to an end as our internal auditor, but nowhere either in this or the internal governance, general governance statement do we mention the work that was done, I think, during the financial year that we're considering to come up with a replacement arrangement,
Yes.
which I think is a material thing from a governance perspective. So whether we can just capture that as a minute item, or maybe add one extra sentence to the report, I don't know. But I think it's worth capturing because it's a good piece of work. It will. I think it's potentially going to strengthen our arrangements, and people should know about it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Can I just ask one again? Item 7, the last sentence there, you say identifying areas for improvement. Is this just a general statement there? It's not that you have identified areas for improvement?
No, this is regarding the quality assessment that basically internal audit should go through, and obviously with partnership with our new auditors, Southern Internal Audit Partnership, we as also an internal team, we have to be assessed every 5 years. So that's actually, yes, there isn't an issue, I'm not perceiving it to be an issue, but any issues that are identified are to be brought to the audit committee.
Okay, thank you. And then just finally, coming back to it's item 9, you mentioned document control. Can that be put down there as another bullet point at the bottom of that list? As part of the quality control function. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more questions? No? Okay, then if we're happy with Gail's report, it is recommended that the committee considers and notes the annual interim audit report for this year 2018-2019. Is that agreed?
Yeah.
Item 10, annual governance statement 2018-19. Could I ask Peter and Vicky to present?
Thank you, Chair. I'll present. So the annual governance statement 2018-19, the statement describes the corporate governance arrangements in place during the financial year, being reported on alongside the financial statement. The AGS is therefore published alongside the statement of accounts. The two documents have to be published together. The purpose of the AGS is to provide assurance on the integrity of the management and the stewardship arrangements in place at the Council, and therefore provides overarching assurance of the financial and economic picture that's being presented in the financial statements themselves. So it's a much wider context of that the statements are very much financially driven with some narrative in there around the operation of the Council. The AGS actually focuses on the operation of the Council and the wider context in which we live and looking at that integrity. The statement complies with the SIP for Solace Delivering Good Governance guidance, which gets updated every year, and there hasn't been any changes to that guidance for this particular year, so we are fully compliant with what's required of us to do. The layout of the document itself is pretty straightforward. It walks the reader through each aspect of governance, and I'll just help you walk through that. So it starts with the meaning of corporate governance. There's a paragraph there which describes what is this term corporate governance. It then describes what are considered to be the key principles of corporate governance and just really what they mean in plain English. It then describes the assurances that are in place here at Waverley to provide that governance. So what are the documents and control processes that we rely on to make sure that we have the right governance in place, the checks and the balances to make sure decisions have integrity here at Waverley. And then it then goes on to describe the decision-making framework at the council. So it just describes how the council goes about, as in the full council, the membership, because it's the membership here that makes the decisions, not the officers. It goes on, so it describes how that works across the committee systems. So effectively it provides a framework for our decision-making. Then the document gets down into some more specifics, and it describes what changes in governance have happened during the year. So the document this time focuses on the changes in the executive that have happened, the redesignation of the standards panel to a committee status, and changes to the planning committee seat allocation, which we consider to be the key governance issues for this particular matter. Then it drills down a little bit further. It provides an explanation of governance issues that were considered during the year from the operational aspects of the council, as well as the political context. So the audit committee considers any potential governance issues during the year. So every time we meet, it's on the agenda. Members of the audit committee are asked to consider anything they've heard or know about, or anything officers have brought forward to anything at all that could be considered to be a governance issue, and these things get discussed and minuted at each meeting to make sure that they are fully explored to check if there is a governance issue, or maybe there's just something that needs to be put back into a other committee to be looked at, such as the value for money in the scrutiny committee or one of the other scrutiny committees. So then paragraphs 5.1 through to 5.4 actually just walk you through the different aspects of the considerations that have happened around governance for a particular year. And then for context, there's a short explanation of the significant operational events that have occurred during the year. So it's a very short paraphrasing of a walkthrough of just what's gone on at the council for the last 12 months. And then it provides a summary of the key topics that the audit committee has covered during the year. So the audit committee has been very busy at each of its meetings. There's been quite a full agenda to cover this. But when you read through that summary, it's actually quite a wide context that's been looked at across lots of different aspects of the council and governance. The report then moves on to risk, so it kind of changes tact at that point. It moves on to look at risk, because risk is really significant for Waverley, and we do have to consider this aspect of operations. So the report then discusses how risks are managed at Waverley, so it gives you more general context of risk and risk management, and then it goes on to describe the roles of internal and external audits and how risk is managed in that respect. And that's more or less the whole body of the document. Then it goes on to give a statement of assurance, which comes from the Chief Exec and the leader of the council. The document needs to be approved by the audit committee, and it has to be signed off by the leader and the Chief Exec at the same time, effectively as of today, for this meeting if it's approved. So that's a quick summary, so I'm happy to discuss any aspects of this.
Thank you. Just a couple of minor points here. On 5.3, we talk about provide a framework for planning, decision making, ensure capital expenditure and investment decisions are affordable, prudent and sustainable. Does that include cost effectiveness specifically? And wouldn't you see that as one of the major items there?
It would be, purely for several reasons. We always look for value for money, and the way we go around securing value for money in any capital schemes through our procurement process, we have a procurement officer absolutely totally dedicated to 100% dedicated to ensuring that all procurement is undertaken not just within our contract procedure rules and our financial rates, but also put the most efficient route to get the best price for the best outcome. The capital strategy went further than that in that it also was as a result of a value for money working group, capital group, that looked at the capital process last year to expand out on how we deliver capital projects to ensure that once we've secured good value for money in our procurement process, that we're actually delivering it, the value through the implementation of that project, and we're not losing something along the way through poor delivery. So we do have a very strong eye on value for money in all of our spend, not just the capital side of things.
Okay, thank you. And the earlier 5.2, you say this is the air quality issue. Lessons learned exercise will be undertaken. Is this waiting for the conclusion of the police investigation?
Chairman, that lessons learned exercise has been undertaken, but it hasn't been completed and reported back because of the outcome is still uncertain. The final outcome is still uncertain, but we know enough of what happened and how it happened to have picked up on that. And Richard Homewood led on that review. It happened sort of within his service, and he led on the picking up of the actions to change certain things. Did so in consultation with the Waverley Scrutiny Committee about a year ago, actually. So, yeah, possibly the tenets could be changed here, but it isn't completed just because the whole process hasn't been wrapped up. You're right.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. This doesn't relate to the report. It actually relates to the officer's introductory report. So page 23 of our papers, item 4 of the introduction. It says the AGS is required to be signed by the leader and the chief executive on behalf of the council, and then approved by us. I don't see any signatures on the version we've got in front of us. That's fairly fundamental because their commitment to this is something that we should be happy with, and we don't have that piece of paper in front of us to say that commitment's there. So I'm a little concerned that we approve this without being absolutely sure, or being sitting in a room somewhere there's a copy with signatures on it. It'd be fine to see that, but this is fundamental, I think.
Chairman, could I, Lauren, do you mind just get our external auditor's view, because actually there's a bit of a chicken and egg, and it's been talked about before in terms of what should happen first. Should the leader and the chief executive be presented with a statement that the audit committee is satisfied with, or should you be presented with? And I'm not sure what the sort of the Grant Thornton or even the national view is from an audit perspective. And I think we've worked with our auditors in the past to do it in the order where it's almost simultaneous, but without the leader and the chief executive being in the room to sign.
I think that is the norm. I think it is sort of it's a bit of an iterative process in that we would hopefully have a version at committee that the chief exec and the leader have seen and are happy with, but they normally would not be comfortable actually signing it until they're happy with the audit committee are also happy with it. If that makes sense.
And that's all right, but that's not the words that are in the document.
I think that's I think it's the covering report actually that it states that it's the other way around actually. So
yes.
that's where the error is in the covering report. The procedure is that, I mean, the leader, and I can perhaps give some sort of reassurance. The leader and the chief executive have had the document for a couple of weeks to give them a good read, and they are fine with it. Because Tom Hall's been on leave, comes back tomorrow, although he's sort of physically put his ink on it, but it is on his desk for him to do that tomorrow. But you're right, Councillor Stephen, the report certainly suggests it's the other way around, but I think in the last few years with the working with our auditors just to check in we're not doing anything procedurally incorrect, we have tended to have brought the document in here first and then got the signatures on later on, but it's misleading the way we presented it.
That's fine. So yeah, suggest maybe we should have a minute that states that it's been noted by the officers that the wording of the officer report was correct.
We don't need to add anything to the accepting the report subject to those signatures.
Chairman, the function of the committee in this case is to actually approve it. I think if you wanted to amend that to say subject to the signature from the lead room, that's absolutely fine. And then we'll make sure that happens, and then the delegation process gets signed off that that's happened, and then that completes your approval. If you want to put that subject to on there.
What do you think, Richard? That's something you would support or don't think necessary?
Well, this should be spelled out clearly in terms of reference, and I apologise because this is another one that I left for. This was good. I left to the last minute. Whatever we're supposed to do, I'm just querying the disparity between what we're actually doing and what the words say.
Chairman, the report describes the order incorrectly, because the order is normally document in, approve, and then they after get the signatures on there, having those two individuals having seen it some time ago and become comfortable with it. So, but I completely understand if the committee want to put a subject to on that.
Well, we'll come to that at the...
But it is the committee's decision to approve it or not approve it, and so I suppose you'd have to ask yourself what happened if you approved it and then one of the signatories didn't want to. Well, we'd have to start the process again, I guess, and then we'd miss the statutory deadline.
Well, you made a point, didn't you, Richard? You know, you can either make a minute to the effect that
I think so.
confirmed that
exactly.
Traditionally,
report
we
is
have signed this off
acceptable
without
by
a signature, so
individuals
there's no point
concerned.
in changing
and then
tradition.
you know that frees us up to
Yeah.
Could I suggest we all submit it that it comes to us in a different format next year?
Which...
The wording should be changed to...
Okay, just...
sorry.
Okay. Just picking up your point, Chair, as well. On 5.3, under planning review, the council underwent an LGA, I think it was the Golf Association, planning peer review during the year. It would be very useful to have some reference to where we could find where the outcomes from that was, what the lessons were. So is that exactly the same under 5.2 when it happened? Yeah, I know you're going to do sort of an outcome report on that. Thank you, that's fine, thank you.
Chairman, I'm conscious of how many new councillors started at Waverley in May, and you would have missed last July's peer review. So I think it is important. I mean, it's in the public arena, and there's an action plan. But I think we'll put that back out because you wouldn't necessarily know to go looking for it. So I think we'll do that to all councillors actually. That would be very helpful. We'll just shortcut the routing around and we'll just send it to everybody. I mean, I think it's worth saying that actually it wasn't wholly accepted by councillors when we took it through, but you'll pick that up in the minutes for in the ONS report earlier this year when we took it through. But it was an exercise the council decided to, so we'll send links around to all councillors actually, and perhaps make reference to the fact that it was asked at committee, asked for at committee.
That sounds good, thank you.
Okay.
Okay then, in that case, it's recommended that this committee approves the annual government statement for 2018-2019. Is it agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Item 11, statement of accounts. Can I ask Peter to present?
Yep, Chairman, I'll just touch on this. Firstly, I'd say thank you to members for coming to the session that we had a few weeks, I think 3 weeks ago or so. Hopefully that was useful. I think all members came to that. Thank you for that. And it's a pretty complex document. I think we said at the time it's, as we say in paragraph 5 of the report, the format and content largely prescribed are very much governed by statutory codes of practice. I think Vicky brought some of those along to the training session. There's a lot in there. So the committee has got delegation to actually approve the accounts. It doesn't go on beyond here to council. This committee is the final destination for the accounts, and I have to have, before this meeting, signed the statements to certify they give a true and fair view of the financial position. I did that at the end of May, and they were the unaudited accounts that were put onto the website. So hopefully a combination of the session that we had and councillors' questions in between time have given members sufficient sort of comfort that you can approve the accounts this evening. I was pleased to hear from Laura Lynn and Grant Thornton that substantially the work has been completed on the audit, but did note that there's still an outstanding item that hopefully can be resolved this week. Maybe we can come back to that, Chairman, after any discussion on this item in terms of the recommendation and what we need to do with that. So just three parts to the recommendation. The first is actually to approve the accounts. The second is a letter of representation, which we're required by the regulations to send, and the chairman and myself sign that letter, and that's pretty standard audit practice. And we send that off to as our auditors. And then the third point, confirming the accounts have been prepared on an ongoing concern basis. Hopefully members are satisfied with the explanation that we put in the covering report on that one. Chairman, I wasn't going to go into huge amounts of detail on the accounts, but the team are here if you want to ask any questions around any aspects of that. Clearly there were some pages, as I mentioned earlier, that were sent subsequently with the changes on the pension, and we will be incorporating those in there, plus some presentational improvements that Councillor Seaborn raised that we've circulated. So the final document will incorporate all of those things. If you take any questions, and Vicky's here, who obviously does an awful lot of the work, the legwork, and Peter also.
Richard.
Chairman, what happens if, heaven forbid, the auditors do come up with that anything as a consequence of that last little bit of uncompleted work? I mean, we all know the probability is very low, but it just seems a little strange that we approve something and then with a very low risk of the auditors turning around and saying we don't actually approve.
Chairman, do you want me to?
Well, yes, you've prepared this, so yes.
Well, so the Chairman and I had a discussion just before the meeting actually, because we were aware from Laura Lynn's work this afternoon that whilst substantially you work your way through the outstanding list, there's sort of one item in particular that needs a bit more work on over the next few days. Now, yeah, certainly I hope that doesn't lead to any significant changes, but I think we need to cover that. This is the point I was going to bounce back to actually, but if you're happy with us to deal with that now, Chairman. I think Councillor Seaborn, you're absolutely right. If you approve the recommendations as is, then if there is a change to make after the event, I have no authority to make that change, and neither does the Chairman unless the committee give us that authority. So following the conversation Chairman and I had just before your training session actually on the same, I've drafted with Amy a potential change to this recommendation that gives us that leeway. So if members are feeling comfortable to approve the accounts but want to give the Chairman and myself a delegation in order just to make any tweaks to the accounts and or the letter of representation that may come out of the outstanding work, then we've drafted a couple of words here and can read through those if you like at the appropriate point.
I would add to that, as long as there's no substantive change which would require the committee to be reformed. Yes, Chairman, and I think the Chairman will represent you in that regard when we sit down. If Grant Thornton come up with something very significant, I would certainly be saying that needs to come back to the committee, and I'm sure the Chairman would too. And so if you give that delegation in a set through an amended recommendation, that would give us the ability to make that judgment and potentially avoid another meeting, which would just be considering one line, or nothing, or something very small. But I wouldn't have the authority at the moment to make any change at all, nor with the Chairman. So. But we would make that judgment, and if there's something major we need to come back to the committee, we would need to reconvene
and have a meeting. Now, that probably runs us into some difficulty with 5 clear days, etc., and the statutory deadline, but because this has happened so recently, i.e. this afternoon, I think certainly first thing tomorrow morning, our team will be speaking to Laurelyn's team about the timescales. Did you want me to come back to the wording later, Chairman, or just read that out now?
Are there any more comments on the accounts? In that case, we can go through the recommendations. And if I read out what was prepared, delegation is given to the Strategic Director, S151 Officer, in consultation with the Chairman to consider any changes to the audit finding report, and if satisfied with the report, to make any necessary amendments to the accounts and or letter of representation, and subject to this, the Audit Committee.
Just one question, Chairman.
Sorry, 3 recommendations. Okay, the 3 recommendations are: we, 1, approve the statement of accounts for the financial year, ending 31st of March 2019. Number 2, approves the letter of representation for 2018 and 19. Number 3, confirms that the accounts have been prepared on a going concern basis. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Subject to the proviso that you read out. Subject to the proviso, presumably that you...
Subject to that, yeah, we said.
Mr. Chairman, just what would one consider significant? Is there going to be a great difference in evaluation? I wouldn't have thought it would be tremendous.
I wouldn't expect there to be, but it's just in case there is some issue that arises. This is an insurance statement.
From what was said earlier, it's a valuer's opinion of a valuer's opinion.
Yeah. So the work we do is, as a firm, we have a valuer who we commission to provide us with a report on national and regional indices, and we use those indices to sort of challenge the valuations performed by the council's valuer. And so what we do is quite high level and quite brute force, but it does result in queries which we then have to follow up, and it's that sort of challenge that we're still working through at the moment.
And normally, Chairman, we'd have more time, and we'd be having those conversations a few weeks back, and we wouldn't be pushing up against the meeting actually. So it's quite normal for us to have those sort of robust discussions around policy approaches and valuation approaches, but they normally do happen in the thick of the audit in June. Yeah, and so apologies that that this is coming up now, but it's as Lauren explained, it's not everybody's fault as such, but we were keen to give the option of members of agreeing the accounts in anticipation of there not being anything significant. I think it's useful actually to explore what we mean by significant, so that it helps guide us, Chairman, when we're sat down later this week thinking, should we sign that off under delegation, or do we need another meeting? I mean, it could be that there is a material change, and the difference between materiality and not materiality is a couple of noughts maybe, but it's the impact on the accounts that's probably important. If there's a difference in valuation, a really significant difference in valuation approach, and Grant Thornton said, if you go with that, we will have to qualify your accounts, then I'd suggest that's something we'd need to come back and talk to members about. I think if, regardless of whether it's material or not, if we're so fundamentally at odds on a particular point, then that would be tricky. I think if we reach an agreement, and even if there's an adjustment to the accounts, that's probably something that we could do under delegation. If it's got a fairly limited scope to it, and it might be changing one note and a couple of figures, a bit like the pension one actually, that there's a bit of a ripple effect. But overall, the accounts aren't misstated fundamentally is one sort of narrow item.
I mean, if there were to be something major that needed addressing, bearing in mind the legal requirement to meet the July 31st deadline, what's the implication of that?
So that's largely about timing, and so we've got five working days, and after some
if it rolls into tomorrow and we call the meeting, it can still be the 31st technically. Now, councils do miss that deadline, and we don't get taken to court. I don't know, Lauren, if there's anything you can advise on procedure from the auditor's perspective.
I think it's worth noting that the 31st of July is not actually the audit deadline. It's the deadline by which the council have to have published a set of accounts that they are happy with, but the audit doesn't actually have to be finished. So, worst case scenario, it could be in a position where the council publishes a set of accounts along with a statement that just says the audit is not yet concluded, and then you've still met your statutory duty.
Okay, so there is no legal implication then in the short term. Thank you.
And generally, you could argue we've already done that, because at the end of June we published a set of accounts, albeit unaudited, that we were happy with. Now, clearly, if issues come out of the audit, well, we might choose to change them and then republish, but it's reassuring to know there's a little bit of sort of wriggle room on getting any revised audit findings report back in if necessary. I mean, I'm hoping that it's a fairly sort of narrow issue, and we can deal with it, and we can deal with it in the next couple of days. That's with that.
Thank you.
So, Chair, if I just share with colleagues the reason why it was on my mind. Last year, we ended up revaluing the Cranley Leisure Centre to the tune of £4 million. So, and there was quite a lot of angst and concern about that amongst members of this committee. So, it's not beyond the realms of possibility that something could crawl out of the woodwork that might be questioned by an alternative approach to looking at things. Just useful background, I think. Thank you.
If we could have, the committee could have an update as to changes which were made.
Certainly. Yeah. So I think the way that the delegation would work would be, let's say a couple of days' time, we get to the point, and if there is a change, and chairman and myself agree that, you know, in the spirit of this discussion and what you've agreed, it doesn't need to come back, and we can sign that off under delegation, then we would send around a note to all committee members saying what we've done and why. We wouldn't necessarily, I don't think, because you've given us delegation, open up a full sort of consultation on it. Do you want a meeting or not?
It's for information.
Yes, it would just explain the reasons why we feel that it can be done under the delegation and what the impact is, and then send that round as a delegated decision.
Yeah.
If that's okay.
Would it be useful for members if we also circulate an updated version of the audit findings once the audit is fully concluded?
I think that would be useful.
It wraps it up.
And by law, we actually have to publish a notice on our website saying that the audit's concluded as well, actually. So that's when, if anyone out there is watches these things, well, then they'd look for the final report as well, because we would say the audit has concluded.
Okay, thank you. Next one, item 12 is risk management, and again, Peter is going to present.
Thank you, Chair. So risk management is something that we bring to the audit committee each quarter. Because we've got such a heavy agenda tonight and it's a new committee, we felt that it was probably a little bit too much to bring the risk reports along tonight. It would make a lot more sense for us to propose to the committee that we actually have a informal seminar looking in depth at our risk management framework. So maybe we can all get together for an hour or two, afternoon or evening, and we can just have a complete session looking at the risk management framework, and then after that, for each consecutive audit meeting, after that we can bring along the audit report and the changes, not the risk reports and changes in line with our usual reporting after that. And so it's up to how the committee feel about that.
I think I would be happy to do that. The members are saying, yeah, can we say that? So, yeah, okay, we can arrange that.
I'll have that one. Thank you, Amy.
So, Chair, when we've done that with audit committee before, it's actually been a really good set. I know, thinking about sitting in a room talking about risk, perhaps it's when you're overexcited, but I don't think Councillor Seaborn would agree. It's been a really good exercise actually. Look at the world through a risk lens and the things that are faced, and it's been good. Yeah, so it takes that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Next item, 13 Audit Committee current work programme. So all we need to do is note this item.
Can I ask a quick question? This is a response to the list of items that we went through. Yeah, I mean, this is what you're telling us we have to do in order to get to the programme this year. Okay.
Chairman, this is the standard recurrent items, so there may be ad hoc items that would come to the committee, but this is what you can sort of anticipate going forward for the year.
We can have items as we see fit
Yeah,
through the
of
course of the year.
And you may need to react to things as the year goes through as well that you choose. So you might need a special meeting, you might want to react to something that's happened and say we need to pull that into a meeting to do some sort of learning and investigation work.
And I guess these are recurring items of the year for the same format, more or less.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. So, I think I've said that, Chairman, you're right, to note it's annual programme, yes. Item 14, exclusion of press and public. Are there any items to consider in exempt? I don't think there is.
Decline meeting closed.
Okay, good. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.